today about all things compassionate communities and home funerals. Bec is a bit of a force of nature, and she's been in the space of community building, death, and dying for many, many years. So, for those of you who don't know Bec very well, she's an end of life doula, independent funeral director, author, death care educator, and advocate. In 2011, she entered the funeral industry, working across the many roles, including pre-planning, administration, mortuary, funeral arranging, and directing. She's a trained she retrained as an end-of-life doula in 2018 and became an independent funeral director and has worked in home-based death care and family-led funerals ever since. And then Bec was awarded the prestigious Churchill Fellowship to undertake an international research and report on changes and disruptions in the end-of-life space. And that culminated in her book, A Heartfelt Undertaking. And it's a wonderful book for anyone who hasn't read it. In 2022, Bec was selected as one of 10 speakers to give a TEDx talk on home funerals. And she has been the president of the National Death Advocacy Network, NDAN, since 2020, and is also the president of the Australian Home Funeral Alliance. And I think with my conversations with Bec over the years, her passion and advocacy is in community. It's in community building and equitable access for anyone and everyone when it comes to death, dying, and bereavement. So I'll hand over to you, Bec, now to take us through home funerals and your knowledge and experience to share with us. And then once Bec's finished, we'll open for questions. So if you've got a question, just put it in the chat or make a note of it, and then we'll have a really nice conversation afterwards. So over to you, Bec.
Thanks, Harp. And yeah, so today I was going to talk through home funeral, but not with a lot of words on slides. Most of what I've got to show you today are just pictures, because what I've found here, so I'm in Lutruwita, Tasmania. I'm about 45 minutes south of Hobart, Nipaluna, and I am working here in community a lot. And what I find is when I educate people about home funeral, the idea, if you ask someone to step into something that is a foreign concept or something that, they might understand the idea of, but have never experienced, it's really good to be able to go, and this is what it looks like. And so I've been in the very unique position, which is unique to me and not really unique to humanity, but I did experience 5 deaths in 4 years of my close people. And over those deaths, they were documented in different ways. For transparency, my grandma and my great aunt and I had many conversations, and they knew that I wanted to document their deaths, and they were quite okay with me sharing those stories to help other people. My mum, my brother, and my dad. So these are all the stories, and they were also, aware. I didn't talk to my dad directly, but I know he was a champion of the work that we do here in community. And yeah, so these are the stories and some of the pictures that we'll talk through today. Just put your hand up if you know what a home funeral is. Yeah? Have you been involved in a home funeral? No. Okay. So a home funeral can be anything at all. That's the first thing. It is essentially when family, friends, or community come together with any aspect of caring for a person's body. It's safe, it's legal, it's empowering, and it is that time between a person's death and the disposition of their body. Now, that could be hours, that could be days. It doesn't matter how long it is. And it's not about It's not necessarily about ceremony. It could be any of those things. It could be spending time with the person. It could be shrouding them. It could be you want to transport them. You want to organize the cremation or burial. You want to wash and dress them. You want to be the person to put them in a coffin. That none of this stuff happens isolated. So it doesn't matter where the person is, even in a funeral home, if you're using the industry, you can still engage those professionals on your own terms. You can still have conversations and say, I do want this, I don't want that, I want to do that. Like, you get to be in control of it. And that family-led, family-directed, community-minded approach is what makes home funeral. Duration can be as long as as long as you want it to be, and duration does matter. The time that you get, particularly in a home setting, the time that you get with your person is dependent upon how they've died, how quickly they're cooled, and what's going to happen inside their body as well. But it's essentially, a home funeral is just a different way of approaching someone's death and dying. It is about re-empowering family and community to do things for themselves. So why would we choose home funeral? Because you get better community support. So many people, when I worked in the big industry, would say they'd come to collect ashes afterwards and they'd say, oh, it was fine up until the funeral, and then, everyone went back to work. But when you've gathered people to wash and dress the body of someone, they feel like they've shared something incredible together, and they're bonds that don't go away. So you also have increased agency with the families. Grief becomes something they get to experience, something that they're a part of, rather than handing everything over and being on someone else's time frame. So when a death occurs and you call the funeral director and the funeral director comes, you're then told when they're free to have a meeting, when the chapel's available. You're on someone else's time frame the whole way. With home funeral, your grief gets to do what it needs to do when it needs to do it, and you get to retain control and agency. There is definitely more paperwork to do, and there is definitely more things to do with home funeral. But in my time, that changes how grief and bereavement is experienced. The other thing there is engaging with professionals on your own terms, and that's really important. It's really important to be able to say, no, I don't want you to take them back to the mortuary before you bring them to my house. I want them to come straight to me. Or I want, I don't need to do the paper. I don't need to do an hour's worth of paperwork. My head's not in the right space. You can do the paperwork, but I've got my person. So if you know what's possible, if your death literacy is at a point where you know what you can do and what is possible, you then get to have these conversations with professionals that support how you want to approach your version of a home funeral. So you get different options over vigiling. And then there's all of the things: coffin shrouding, planning ceremony, memorialization, all of the things that you don't need a funeral director for, but can be convenient if you want them to. Catering, notices, flowers, all of the things. You get to control how much of that you engage with. So death care in the home, yes, there is more work to do. And home can be anywhere, as I said. You need to know people can be taken home if they don't die at home, even from a coroner's, even after an autopsy. And there may be some support or help you need with that, but it is entirely possible. If you're going to have someone die at home and stay at home, cooling needs to take place more quickly than it would if they were going to go into a refrigerated environment. How long a person can stay there, as I said, does depend on the body and how the person's body travels. But, days is fine as long as you can keep them cool. You can look after someone in a bed or a massage table. It's much harder to look after them in a coffin. Generally, we say a body temperature of 5 degrees or less is what needs to be maintained to keep someone at home safely. And then you can spend the time preparing them. If there's fluid, and there's not always fluid, that's a misnomer. But if there is fluid, then you can deal with that. It is also a finite resource. The body doesn't keep making more after someone dies. So very, very few times in the years I've been doing this have I needed to intervene where fluid was an issue. I think I've had probably 3 instances where I've needed to intervene since 2018 to now. So it's not the common experience. And all of this is really, I see it as social justice work. I love it. I see it as reclaiming. I think we gave away so much to the industry and we went, oh, our lives are getting busier and they're going to do that. That's great. But I see this as it's a reclaiming our knowledge and our power. And I actually think it's in our bones. Doing this work is just in our bones. We, often I'll go and gather a family, even in my own family. The very first, there you go, the very first person we looked after was my great aunt. And she came home when she died and she was home with us for 4 days. And this was the night before her ceremony. And we gathered our community and we washed and we dressed her and we cared for her. When that process started that evening, my mum was like, you can see my mum in the top corner there in the blue jumper with the washcloth. And my mum was like, just, how do I touch her? Like, even me banging on about all of this as much as I have done, even my family was like, we've never done this before. What do we do? By the end of this, I'm sitting over in the corner. No one actually needed me. It's just, we remember when we do it, that as humans, we've been caring for our dead for centuries. And it's only, we've had a funeral industry for, 120, 150 years. We've been caring for our dead for thousands of years prior to that. So this is Auntie Betty. We don't call her Ethel because she doesn't like that. So it's Auntie Betty, and she was little. She'd had a fall, and that's actually how she died. She'd had a fall and she'd smashed her shoulder. Her body went into shock and she just never recovered. I think from the time of death, or from the time of the fall to the time of death, was just over a day, and she had 1 Panadol in that time. She never even really felt the pain. But this is us gathered around. My dad decided she needed warm feet, so we had to go and get socks for her. We picked her clothes. We decided what would suit her. Now, when we brought her home, well, when I said I was going to bring her home, my son was like, "Oh no, you're not bringing your dead body into the house." I was like, "Yeah, we are." And he's, "Oh, just nothing to do with it." I was like, "Okay." So she stayed in my mum's room for most of the time. And then this was the night before. So we'd washed and dressed her. We'd carried her out into the lounge room. You can see in that bottom picture, like, she's on dressing table, like side table, bedside tables. Like, it's nothing fancy. but we carried her out. And then my son goes, "Oh, can I have a look?" Yeah, no worries. And he has a look and he's like, "Oh, she's lovely." And then he's like, "Well, you've done all this stuff for her. What can I do?" And I said, "Well, someone needs to write her name. Like, her coffin needs a name." And so that was his first moment of engagement. And this is what can happen, late at night around pizza on the dining room table. It's It just is what you need to do when you need to do it. And fast forward all the deaths. And this is him with her ashes. He says, we're on a road trip taking him to uni, and he says, I want to scatter her ashes. And so he waded out into the water. He did that. He did that for her, from death all the way through. Her sister, my grandmother Nan, she was at home with us for 5 days. And you can see there's, discoloration in her fingers, and that's all. The conversation's happening at the moment about hands and discoloration, and that's okay. It's all really normal. But we had her. You can see the computer in the background and the bookshelf. She was in the bedroom with us, and we just cared for her. We had her there for days. We decided to use this coffin, this peace pod, and we had her. We got it without it wasn't finished, so we could pick the colors, we could paint it. Then my son, his starting point was, oh, I'm writing her name on the coffin. So like the next death along, you're a little step further in, because you've had this space and community, and you've been held to do things yourself in your own time frame. And the real evidence for that, to me, in my family, is that photo at the bottom where my mum's putting powder. She got up at 8 o'clock one night and she was like, "We didn't put powder on your grandmother." And I was like, "It's okay. I reckon she probably doesn't need it, Mum." And she was like, "Oh no, she never left the house without powder." And so here we are, 8 o'clock at night, and Mum's there in the kitchen putting powder on Nan's face. And it's like, if Nan had been in a funeral home mortuary, Mum would have had a sleepless night, going, "Oh my God, we haven't done this thing for my mum." This is being able to do what your grief needs to do when it needs to do it, and surrounded by the people that will hold you in it. And then we got together and say goodbye. So that's my friend Tara comes and does the flowers. And you can see, like, this is 5 days. We have not packed her mouth. We have not stitched her mouth. She doesn't have eye caps in. I don't know if you can see closely. There's a little bit of an indent on her eyelids, because the coloured parts of the eye will often lose integrity really quickly because they're mostly water. So one of our community at the time, couldn't handle the gap, because Nana was quite short, the gap between the bottom of her feet and the end of the coffin. And so, she'd been making these dolls, and she went and got all these dolls to give to Nan, and nest her and fill that gap. So, it's just the spontaneous things that happen. And so this was her ceremony. We painted, my mum had this idea to paint the doves on the coffin, and so they became like the canvas for people to write their messages on. We gathered all the things that were meaningful and beautiful, and because we had the time to. When my dad died, now my dad's death was a suicide, so it was all quite shocking at the time. And you can see he came home from the coroner in that unceremonious blue plastic bag. But we set him up at home, and he was at home. So he'd been 2 days with the coroner, and then he was with us for a further 5 days. So by the time his ceremony happened, he'd been dead for a week. My friend, some of you might know Pia, Dr. Pia Interlandi, she came down to Tas and did casts of my dad's hands for me so I could hold them, which was, such a precious gift. And we got to do it in our own time and in our own backyard. We decided that because people were coming and going, and Dad had been a member of Rotary and was quite, known in some communities. And so everyone who wanted to say goodbye when they came to the house would take a leaf from the garden and they would stencil it onto his coffin so that everyone got to give him something. And it's that thing that I said before about the acts of service. Everyone got to give something that would hold him. And that, symbolically, that was important. So my son, who had gone from you're not bringing a dead body into the house, was like, his nose hair needs trimming and he needs a shave. And so they did that. They did that, themselves. That's him and my brother and my mum. You've got, Tara again there coming and doing the flowers on the kitchen table. It's all just happening in our space. And we got to engage with it or not. We got to come and go. And so did everyone else. They got to just hold each other. And so this was Dad. This was Dad on day 7, the day of his ceremony. So you can see, again, his fingers are discoloured. Not terribly, but a little bit. The tie, the tie sort of kept his mouth quite closed, which was lovely because we didn't stitch his mouth at all. He was just left as much in peace as we could. And that was us. Like, we did the dressing of him. We gathered all of his things again. And, because we had his ceremony, it's quite a public ceremony, at the place where the Rotary Club met. So everyone got to sort of be a part of that. The lawnmower is there because my dad would be like mowing the lawn every second day. He was a little bit obsessed with the lawn. And so the lawnmower had pride of place at the funeral. But these are the things that your brain has space to do when you feel the agency of doing it all yourself. The other part of it, the other lesson in his ceremony is that I was his funeral director, I was his mortician, I was also his daughter, and people had sort of said to me, you need to be the daughter at some point. And so we had this plan, like I'm a strong believer that people don't leave ceremony with questions. So I wanted to be really clear that his death had been a suicide, that we didn't have to like that, but we were honouring him and we were respecting his choice. And I wanted to be able to talk about that. And so I did. And then my partner had said to me, well, how about you do that intro stuff and then you sit down and I'll take the rest of the ceremony. And I was like, that's logical. Like, that makes sense. And he got about maybe 5 minutes in and I just, like, in front of everyone, I was like, stop. You just need to stop. And I love you, but you need to sit down because I need to do this for Dad. And so that's something that only happened because it was family led and because I felt comfortable, safe and held by my community enough to be able to do that. So then my brother dies and it's winter and it's winter in Tassie, but we knew we couldn't have him. His death was sudden. He was 37 and it was completely unexpected. And he was also a coroner's case, but we knew we couldn't have him at home for as long as we could. And his death was a community effort on many levels. So my brother was quite a big boy and the manual handling of him at home for days wasn't going to be possible. But everyone, even the people in the industry who are skeptical of my approach and what I do, came together to help. I had one funeral home build me that coffin because they had a facility to do that. I had another funeral home lend me a bariatric trolley. so I could pick him up from the coroner. I had another funeral home give me access after hours to their mortuary because they had a lifter that could lift him. And we had just all of this industry community come together to support me, knowing what was important to me to get him home. So we got that coffin within 24 hours made and delivered. We painted it. You can see our dinner is in the, we painted while we had dinner. The dinner's in the coffin. But we ate around the coffin and painted and decorated it for him, all with the Viking symbols. He was a Viking at heart, my brother. And so that's what it ended up looking like. Yeah. People got to contribute to that, which was really nice. Stuck my runes all over it. We nearly set fire to the flowers with the candles, but that's another story. It's all of the things that you go, that could only be okay if a family did it. If a hired funeral director did it, someone would have kittens, but because it was us, it was okay. And we got him home the night before his ceremony, or the afternoon. We got him home for nearly a day. And so that was really important to us. So this is my baby brother Daniel. And yeah, it was a community effort on many fronts, because the industry had to come together as a community, and then my people had to come together as a community. But we did it, and we got to bring him home, which was, just special. And then we had his wake at a pub, because why not? And also he was 37 and that really suited him. So we did that. Yeah, which was nice. So that's in the middle there. That's me and his two best mates who flew down from Sydney, and my mum is there as well. So 2 months to the day of my brother dying, my mum died. And mum actually died in the same room that my brother died in, which was uncanny, but life is like that sometimes. Mum, in the time between my brother Daniel's death and hers, she put on about 20 kilos worth of fluid. And we put her into hospital at one point to try and shift some of that fluid out, because there's only so much, oral fluid medication you can take before you need intravenous stuff. So we put her into hospital to try and move some of that fluid away, and nothing worked. They tried and tried and tried, nothing worked. We had nurses checking on her. She had wounds, so they were coming every couple of days to change the wounds. You can see on her foot, she'd had a wound on her foot, and nurses had come the day before and they'd changed that dressing, and it was not like that. That happened really quickly. The next day after they changed the dressings, we were like, what is that smell? And we were like, something died under the house. Like, what's going on? It's not her pad. Like, we looked and looked, and then twigged, we need to check her foot. And that's what we found. I ended up taking that photo because I saw that, and I said to Mum, and we'd had these conversations, but I said to her, Mum, I think it's time for, we need to make a call for a driver. Like, it's now time for that. And Mum said, oh, are you trying to get rid of me, are you? Bit of a joker. And I went, yeah, I think that's where we're at. And so she asked me to take that photo and show her foot, which I did. Now, her father had died of, gangrene and cardiovascular related issues and lost legs and all sorts of things. So she just looked at that and she goes, yeah, that only ends one way. I went, yep. She was never going to be a candidate for an amputation. She was dying anyway. And Mum went, no, make the call. And so we did. So we had her then, we nursed her for just over 4 days, I think, between then and her death. But she wanted sky blue. She wanted to see that getting painted. So that is actually being done in her kitchen. We moved on her dining room table, actually. Yeah, and she got to sit and watch that happen. So that was her wish. Now, when she died, she had, well, we nested her with all of the things. She had 2.5, nearly 3 days at home in bed with us. She did not travel because of all the fluid, and she lost a lot of fluid when she died. She lost more fluid than a bladder could hold. And she'd also started to have, like, her tissue, her skin had flooded. So she was having fluid come through her skin before she died and all sorts of things. So she lost about 8 litres of fluid after death. And that's, significant. But nothing that we still managed that in her bedroom. We still managed that with big 2-litre pads and abdominal massage, and like that was still perfectly doable by her people. So we did that. And on day 3, we looked at her and went, okay, she's ready to go into a fridge now. We can't keep her in her bedroom anymore. By that stage, we had actually built a little mortuary in our backyard, which we still have. And so she went from her bedroom down the backyard into that space that you can see there, which is our little mortuary space, which has a fridge down the other end of the room. But yeah, so people still got to come and spend time with her, and we had her laid out like that for people to come and visit, nested with all of her things, including all of her dog's ashes, her teddy bears, and the book she stole from Auburn Girls High School in like 1973. So we burnt the evidence of that. But yeah, and then we had her ceremony in more of a chapel style space, but we decorated that sky blue coffin, got decoupaged and pot purried and tissue papered and like everything by all of the people who came and went in that space. Gold leaf, you name it, it was on there. And because some of the other deaths have been through COVID, we kind of also made it about, everyone else as well. But we had, we finally got to gather, our actual family could gather. So yeah, that was nice. And then all the goodbye messages and all of the things that people got to say to her. And then, we all just got to spend time, because this is our community. These are our people. My mother, she was actually lovely, but that middle finger was what happened in just about every photo anyone ever tried to take of her. She was like, nah, she hated photos. And it was really interesting, actually, because all the way along, like her journey of living, she would say to me, if you put a photo of me anywhere at my funeral, I will come. You're not having a photo, you're not having a montage, you're not having an order of service. When she was told she was dying and we brought her home, she said, right, you need to make my montage and I need to see it. And so over the course of about a week, we designed her order of service. We put together her montage. She picked the photos. We sat and went through albums. It was such a rich thing we could do that, it was beautiful to do that with her before she died. And I think we got to make some really considered choices that we probably wouldn't have had the brain space to make afterwards. So that is literally family and my family and our community, and how we do death. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Bec, for sharing. It's just, I think the amount of death of close people in such a short period of time, it, is just so much for anyone to even consider digesting. And the way that you've taken us all through this shows the power of what can be done, you know, by reclaiming your people and bringing together community. But I do want to acknowledge, you know, that what you all went through in losing, in your people dying in a short period of time is really significant. And so, you know, we're here and feel that and acknowledge that with you.
I might stop sharing and we can talk.
Yeah, thank you. And so I'm there's no questions in the chat yet, I don't think, unless I've missed any. So I wanted to ask one. And that's around when you bring community together, and you talked about through your presentation, Bec, the different outcome of grief and bereavement when you're able to be of service to your people. And after experiencing so much death of people who are very close to you in a short period of time, you know, what would you say to us all, or when it comes to after the funeral, like, you know, that where grief and bereavement, how it can be digested and embodied, and people can move through that with community or individually?
Yeah, it's interesting because up until the funeral, there's all the stuff to do, right? And then after the funeral, even if it's a really beautiful, held, you know, for want of a better word, good experience. And I think it can, you know, grief is always crappy, but it can also be, you know, a held good experience. But then there is a bit of that kind of lull and that letdown. So the first thing I'd say is sleep, because you've been running on adrenaline and you've been deep in the doing, and you have to get to know the knowing. So you just rest and you sleep, and then you start going, what do I need to feel okay to live on? That's the question I still ask families now. I ask that question in, you know, various different ways. And, you know, even if it's what do you need to feel okay to walk away from that gravesite and go home? What do you need to feel okay to know your person's going to be cremated tomorrow? Like, so you need to sit with yourself long enough to know what it is that you need to live on. For me, after all of those deaths, the reality was that my mum had kept a lot of my nana and died. My brother had moved in and brought all his stuff with him. No one had touched any of that. So I inherited 5 people's worth of things in my house. And so for me, what I did was gather my people to start helping me sort that stuff. And we didn't kind of Marie Kondo it, but I had these boxes. I had great big crates, and I was like, one for everyone. And all of over the time, over the photos, I got to share my stories and my memories with my people, whether they knew my people or not. I got to impart some of that. And that was really important to me, to know that those stories are going to live in someone's head. Like because there was you know, that idea of so many deaths in such a short period of time left me feeling really lonely as well. Because I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, I think everyone who remembers me, there is no one left alive who I know in my life who remembers me from primary school. Like I don't have anyone that I know, like it felt heavy and I felt alone. And I was like, one of the things I needed to be able to live on was to share some of those memories and stories. And it didn't matter that it didn't mean anything to anyone else, but I needed to know someone else could hold that with me. And so that is the thing I would say. Get to know what it is you need to live on.
And gather community so they can
Yeah.
walk beside you.
Well, that is you community for me, that was it. The community was the people who were going to help me hold all of that.
Well, they're amazing people, and we've seen how they've activated and as you showed us with each person became more familiar with what to
Yeah.
do and naturally be of service.
This is it. And the development of my son through that process of going from, no, no, you're not bringing your dead body into the house, to, oh, can I peek? To like, I'll write Nana's name on the coffin, to, I'll give Dad his final shave, and I'll be the one to scatter Aunt's ashes. And with Mum, he stood in vigil with her and he held her. Like, it was the development of bringing a community on those journeys means that there is a community of death literate humans who are going to take that knowledge and create compassionate communities in all of their networks, because they know how to have the conversations, they know how to show up, they've learned by those experiences. And if they can lean over the back fence and say to one person, hey, did you know, whatever it is, that's spreading, that's creating the communities we want to live in.
And that's what you are going to be doing more of, excitingly, for people who have joined us who don't know, through the Wicking Trust grant. So you just did a pilot in Melbourne. Can you share a bit about that? Because I think it's really important for everyone to know that, there is support and training, for want of a better word, around how to reclaim home funerals and build those compassionate communities.
100%. Look, the Good Death Impact Network funded us to do a pilot project. So they funded more than half the cost. ARFA funded the rest. And we did two pilot projects, one in Adelaide and one in Melbourne. And it was a pilot of a 2-day workshop. And we created that at ARFA and held on to it. A lot of it, like some of it has some of this is out of that workshop, but it's a 2-day workshop and it covers a lot of things. So it's got a lot of my IP in it at the moment, but the idea is Wicking have now funded us to take that pilot project and create a bigger project around it. So what we've got funding for is essentially creating death care leaders, or something along those lines. And it's going to be in 2 regional centres in Victoria and 3 in Tasmania. And what we're going to do is have, based on a compassionate communities model, we're going to have like 15 activators, so 3 activators in each of those 5 communities. We're going to bring them to Hobart. We're going to put them through a 3-day course. That 3-day course will be the 2-day workshop that we've just piloted, and the 3rd day will be the showing up for grief that Dr. Kerry Noonan has developed through the Death Literacy Institute. So we're combining that stuff. It's a joint project between Social Health Australia, Death Literacy Institute, Australian Home Funeral Alliance, and Sector. And so we are going to deliver the 3 days to the activators. They then go back to their communities and they start doing death literacy work in their communities. About 25 weeks roughly later, I'll show up in those communities and we'll run the workshops for anyone. They will be free. So one of the things one of my hardline knows is that this has to be a free thing for community. People need to pay for it, but it's not community through ticket prices. So we will go and deliver that. We will give those activators in those communities like a daisy box and some Techni ice and some material for shrouding and all that sort of stuff, so that they can, engage with those communities. And then we'll do like a 12-month light touch kind of networking with those activators and just see how it's all going. The project will be evaluated. Hopefully, if we can show a grassroots growth in death literacy and community development, we will get more funding to roll it out across Australia is the plan.
Yes. Well,
And
you know, I
then
put my hand up last year.
yes, we want to bring it to Queensland. The plan, though, is that those activators are key. So it's a volunteer role. You know, for the purposes of this project, there'll be a small amount for, you know, travel or whatever. But the activators become the touch points for those communities. And so it's community doing for community rather than us coming in as the outsiders going, well, this is what you should do. It's like people embedded in those communities who can then be supports and create those networks. So that's what we're hoping. And then when all of the rollouts are done, I actually want to give it all away. So I will take out all of my personal stories. There will be like a licensing agreement of some kind about, because the thing that people will have to agree to is that they can't change the branded slides. So there's, you know, Tender Funerals have allowed us to use some of their stuff, and like all, so there's, you know, it's a compilation. So anything branded can't be changed, and you can never charge ticket prices for people to attend. It's the other agreement. And then people can put their own death stories in because none of it's unique to me.
Yeah, it's fantastic, Bec. I think we're all, you know, so pleased that this is going ahead. There's a huge need for it. And when it comes to equitable access, to ensure that anyone can participate regardless of, you know, how they fare financially. Um,
Yeah, I was determined not to have just something else people needed to find money for. And so, you know, it's very specifically pitched. It's not doula training, it's not professional development, it's not CPD, it's not like I want to talk to the people who are volunteering at the local library and your community development officers and your hospice volunteers and like just people who already show up for people. They're the ones we need to get into this workshop.
Yeah, great. So we have a few questions in the chat. And so Julianne has shared her experience of home funerals where people just couldn't believe that this is possible, that this can be done. And, you know, do people have permission? And so apart from sharing our own experiences like you've done, Bec, Julianne's asking how can we let people know that this is an option? Like, how do we raise that awareness that this can be done?
Yep, I've found if you can engage with community development officers at local councils, neighbourhood centres, you know, so senior citizen centres, go and see if you can do in services to the staff of nursing homes, like people who are seeing people who need that information. And then, you know, it's all legwork. It's all community. You've got to find the people who have access to your demographic and what you need, and they're the people you share your experience with because they're the people who are already talking to other people. And then if you get a really good council, they'll start bringing you in and promoting your events. That's what happened here. One of not the council area where I live, funnily enough, but the next one across gets me to do a bunch of their death stuff.
Yeah, so that building relationships and
It really is.
door knocking. Thank you for everything you've done in this space, all your advocacy. And it is central to a compassionate community. So, you know, sincere gratitude from all of us for what you do and what's coming, because I think we're all walking beside you with that.
Yeah, and none of this happens alone. Like we all need to be out doing our, you know, having our conversations to the best of our abilities and playing to our strengths, but just telling each other that we're there. Like it's all right. It's cool. Like I'm here. Call me if you need. Like whatever it is, we just need to be showing up for our people.
Mm, yeah, that's right. And for each other. And again, thank you so much for your personal experience and share. I wish you all a gentle afternoon ahead, everyone. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to work together and share knowledge and information, so we can build communities that are kind and compassionate all across the country.